Welcome to American Dreams, Keys to Success, with your host, Alan Olsen.
Welcome back. I have here with me today Gary Summers. Gary is the founder of Summers Technology Group. Gary has also founded 4 technology litigation support companies and has held many senior management positions in engineering, manufacturing, and marketing. Gary, welcome to today's show.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
So, Gary, can you tell me about Summers Technology Group? What do they do?
Yes. The Summers Technology Group is a firm that provides intellectual property asset management, or for want of a better term, patent portfolio management. We'll take patents from individuals or from small or medium-sized companies who cannot afford to hire law firms or cannot afford to hire expensive engineering people, and we will sell those patents for them, license the patents for them, or, if necessary, enforce the patents for them on a commission-only, or, as we say in the business, a contingency fee basis. And we focus on high-technology patents, although not exclusively.
Well, you got a lot to work with in the Valley here, then.
Absolutely. And the business was founded as an outgrowth of the recent company I sold, which was an expert witness business company where I had access to thousands of technology engineers across the world, subcontractors and lawyers, which I knew over the years, that were involved in patent litigation. So I'm no longer in the expert witness business with the non-compete I have. So this allows me to still contact the people I know and provide services of a different nature than expert witness.
So, Gary, you know what it's like to start a business. And do you think it's more difficult starting businesses today than it was when you began a few years back?
Yes, definitely. Part of the problem today is, as you probably know, is accessing money. Once money is cheap enough, but trying to get the money and get it approved is another issue for someone who's in a startup mode that, let's say, doesn't have a track record. Accessing key employees. Many people today are very nervous about the current economy, and they're not so readily jumping ship anymore for a flyer for a startup. So trying to get those key scientists or key engineers you need to make your business work is not so easy today. Also, at getting space, getting someplace to rent. Landlords don't want to trust people in startups today. The whole valley is doing better than it was 6 months ago, but still they're very, very nervous.
You know, I have to tell you about the landlord that's getting space. I needed a thermostat put on my wall. So I called the air conditioning company. So it's a couple $100 deal. They wanted a credit application.
Absolutely. I can believe it.
I said, guys, I'll pay you cash. Oh, no, we have to have the credit application. I said, I don't know. Maybe they're selling the receivables or something there to keep things afloat in this economy. But I'm sorry, go on.
Many startup people don't really look ahead to when they will become liquid and when they can sell their stock or sell their business. So they don't really think too much about capital gains taxes or about overhead costs such as medical expenses. But these are real-world costs today that are severely worse today than they were 4 years ago or so. So the startup guy is only worried about how fast can I get the product, and is it better price and better quality than somebody else. He's not thinking. But these are things you need to consider that are more tedious for you today than they were 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So getting time to market, I guess, a lot more competition out there with technology advancements, and
it's more difficult because of all these roadblocks you have in front of you. I mean, most inventors or entrepreneurs don't really worry so much about the competition as they do about trying to launch the product. They believe their product is better than anybody else anyway. But these roadblocks are in front of them that maybe they didn't have 4 or 5 years ago.
What do you think about our current economic policies? I mean, in terms of incentivizing, do they incentivize or do they deter a person to going and doing their own business?
I definitely think they deter. Let me give you an example. Most small businesses, I know mine have been, and I'm probably typical of many startups in Silicon Valley, are S Corp. S Corp, as you know, unlike a C Corp, is an individual. Everything flows through the owners of the S Corp. And the tax policies today penalize individuals if you make more than $200 or whatever the Obama rate is, $250,000 a year, you can go into a higher tax bracket. Well, many of these people are individuals really, but they're S corps, and so if you're getting money taken away from you in the form of taxation, that leaves you less money to plow back into the company. Another unfair capability that exists today is the unfair playing field in the import-export duty taxes. You make a product here and you ship it overseas to some place like China, and they want to tax you 22% or so to bring the product in. Yet they'll bring product in, the same product here, with no taxation. So it's really not a fair competitive.
Hey, Gary, we need to take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages. Visiting here with Gary Summers of Summers Technology Group. Nothing's more important than spending time with your family.
At Greenstone Rogup Olsen Company, we're trusted advisors to the highly successful. Our goal is to help you find the right strategy to protect your wealth for yourself and those you love. Kids, why do I feel like I've just had an audit?
As trusted advisors to the highly successful, we'll make sure that you don't lose your shirt.
Roco helping you along the way.
Apple pie, baseball, and now here's All-American Alan Olsen.
Welcome back. We're here today visiting with Gary Summers of Summers Technology Group, and he's started 4 different technology companies in Silicon Valley and also has a history of being here in the early stage companies within the semiconductors when the Valley was just emerging back in the 70s. Even made his way to company Atari, which many of the baby boomers grew up on those games. But I'd like to get back into Gary before the break. We're talking about the current economic policies. I just want to pick up on that and then move into our next segment about why you did what you did and starting your own companies.
I guess it was the excitement of being your own boss and your own manager and having the freedom to create and develop something that you believed in without having the burden of a big bureaucracy around your neck. And of course, it's a risk-reward, a merit-based kind of scenario. If you fail, you've lost everything. But if you succeed, you can look at that and say, I did this, I accomplished this. And as I said before, I think my feeling is in startups, it's better to have loved and lost and never have loved at all, sort of scenario. So I would take a chance if I could afford it. If I was a young guy today in the Valley, if I could afford it, I saw the opportunity. I had what I thought was a good idea, and I had people around me, my family or friends, supporting me. That I would definitely take a chance.
So going into your own business, you need to be prepared to fail?
Absolutely, and you need to be prepared to have a backup plan. What happens if I fail at this level doesn't mean you failed entirely or totally. You need to say, okay, if this doesn't work, what can I do as a contingency plan? And that doesn't mean that sometimes you have what you think is a great idea, but it's really not the best idea. And you don't know till you get out there and start plowing the ground and start seeing the reaction. And then other people will give you ideas about how to tweak your idea, and then you'll end up this is exactly how I started my first company. When I got laid off, I was sitting at home looking for some consulting work, and someone called me and asked me if I would be an expert witness, and I didn't know what that was. And when it was explained to me and I went and interviewed for the job, it gave me the idea to form an expert witness company. And I would have never thought of that if I hadn't.
How many employees do you have today in that company?
That was about 2,000 people in that firm across the country. And so, but that's just an example. Most people don't wake up one morning and the light bulb goes on. Most people don't. You somehow or another guided into this, and but if you see it and you don't take advantage of it, that's the loss right there. You should not be afraid to take advantage of something you think. And you need some friends and some other people you can bounce the idea off as well.
Did you have a business plan that you put out there on the technology group? Or was it just flying by the seat of your pants as you went through this process?
The company I have now is after 25 years of experience, so I didn't have to go down the same path that I did with the first company. Yes, I did. But I didn't get seed money, or I didn't get startup money. I funded it myself with mostly sweat and blood and not too much cash. And as a result, it was a lot slower. It took me 10 years to ramp the first company up, and then sell it. And then after that, the second company, the third company, and the fourth company went faster and became bigger.
You feel that you have to go faster because of competition out there and change in technology?
Yes,
today?
Yes, absolutely. You always are worried that what you have as a product is going to be superseded by someone else's better mousetrap. You always worry that perhaps your pricing is not competitive. And the most important thing to me was customer service, because I was in the service business and I wanted people to come back to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're visiting here today with Gary Summers of Summers Technology Group. But Gary, I'd like you to stay on for another segment, and I want to talk about Donkey Kong and Centipede and Asteroid and these days at Atari. We'll be right back after these messages.
Protecting your family's health and welfare is a sacred trust. At Greenstein Rogoff Olsen Company, we know that sound financial planning will protect them now and in the future. We're certified public accountants with tax services for the highly successful. For your business and your family, call GrowCo.
Greenstein Rogoff Olsen Company will help you manage your financial affairs so you can focus on what's really important in life.
GrowCo, helping you along the way.
Apple pie, baseball, and now here's All-American Alan Olsen.
Welcome back. I'm here today visiting with Gary Summers of Summers Technology Group. And Gary had been giving us some tips and advice from his experience of starting up several Silicon Valley startup companies here. But, one of the things that didn't come out, and I'd like to touch base on, is your days at Atari. We all grew up on this, the Donkey Kong, Centipede. So how did you get into the company? And, why don't you run us through what it was like?
Okay. In 1979 and 1980 and beginning of 81, I worked at a company called Commodore International and was running their semiconductor operation. And we were shipping Atari 6500 or 6502 is what it was called, microprocessor chips and ROM chips, which were used for video games. And so I was on a first-name basis with upper management at Atari because I was one of their biggest suppliers. I terminated in 81 with Commodore. My wife and I couldn't stand the winters in Valley Forge anymore and moved back to California. And hired on with Atari as a consultant in 81, working for Ray Kassar, who at that time had just taken over as president of Atari when Time Warner bought Atari out from Nolan Bushnell. And so my job was to write a business plan for Atari to get them in the semiconductor business so that they would have some autonomy and wouldn't have to rely so heavily on the semiconductor industry. They could make their own chips. They could design their own chips. They could test their own chips, control their destiny. Before that, they were just locked into one supplier, whether it's National, Intel, Toshiba, whomever, and then they could only buy from them. So my job was to make them so they could buy from anybody. So I subsequently was hired as vice president and general manager to implement that business plan, and I built the Atari Semiconductor Division, which was a large group of 300-400 people with testers and designers and workstations and mainframe computers. This was back in 1982, and we designed all of the custom chips for Atari that went into all the video games, and all the ROMs we did programmed, the software guys programmed, we did the ROMs that went in all the cartridges for all the video games.
So Donkey Kong, who came up with that idea? Was that...
Well, this was a game done by a subcontractor, not by us. So the first games that we did coming off of Pong, if you remember Pong, were Missile Command, Space Invaders, Centipede,
Asteroids?
I think Miss Pac-Man, Asteroids, later Firefox, the Clint Eastwood one. So these were real early on games. Of course, by today's standards, they were pretty crude in terms of graphics. That's because the memory was a lot less. There was not as much memory to store the pixels, and the microprocessors were, 1/1000th of the power they are today. And so you went to the arcade to get the high color, high resolution. These were basically mini computers in an arcade game, whereas the Atari home unit, base unit, we had to sell for $100 or so, and the cost of the chips wouldn't allow you to have high quality. And then there was a home computer, which just getting started, had a little better quality, but not that much.
So how did you know if you had a good game versus not a good game?
Okay, so I had my secret weapon. I was an engineer, of course, and I ran the semiconductor division. But I every Monday had a staff meeting with the director, vice president of purchasing, and the sales manager, marketing manager, and all the upper management of Atari to talk about allocation of games. And so I had two sons at that time, one 7 and one 14, and I would bring the chip home before anyone saw it. I would give it to them. I had a little unit with a zip socket. They could plug it in, no directions, and I'd stand back behind them and I'd watch them, two boys playing this game. And immediately I could tell whether or not they were excited, and there was missiles and bombs and screaming, and this is cool, and I couldn't wait to drop another quarter in kind of attitude. And so I would come to the staff meeting and I would say, my secret market sources said this is going to be a hit, and they all laughed me out. But it was one after another. And then finally the beginning of the end happened. I got called in '83 by my boss, who was Ray Kassar, and he told me that he got a call from God, who was his boss, Stephen Ross, and Steven Spielberg was going to come in and help us design E.T. E.T. was a recent hit by Warner, and his deduction was because it was a movie hit, therefore it would be a good video game. And my group was forced to turn this game out in a time frame that was about a fourth of the time that we normally turn a game out. So everyone was frustrated, and even though Spielberg came to our offices and stuff. But anyway, so I brought the chip home, I plugged it in, and I looked at my two sons, and I watched them for about 10 minutes, and they said, "Oh, Dad, this sucks." That's what they said. And I went, "Oh, no."
You should have had the Reese's Pieces dropping out or
no. And so I go to the staff meeting, and I try to tell everybody, and they laugh me out. So we built millions and millions and millions of these cartridges, and of course they were a colossal flop. And that was when the company moved into a stage of pre-bankruptcy. We had ramped up to about $2 billion in sales. We were the biggest game in town in the Valley. 64 buildings, 11,500 employees, and using more chips than IBM at that time. And then all of a sudden we went to zero.
So what was it? Was it the fact that you had dedicated so many people on a rush project at the expense of knocking out the other back?
It was more of a single product company. I think we had not yet got the personal computer out. We had another project going for a video telephone, hadn't got that out either. And we were all on video games. The Japanese started coming in that time, Nintendo, NEC, others, making higher, more powerful graphics, cutting prices, and we just had one product, and that was it. And then we had that flop, and they put so much of their money into that in the Christmas season, it cratered out, and all the distributors started sending the stuff back to us, which I think subsequently they dug a hole in the desert in El Paso and buried most of it. But I'm not sure about that. But anyway, that's when it moved into a situation the company got sold.
So where's the Atari today?
I really don't know. It was such a nightmare for me. I was in shock. I went over and tried to put my life together after that. But the company was sold to the Tramiel family initially, who had been my former boss at Commodore, and I chose not to stay on. Well, in fact, they pretty much brought their own staff in. And then, I don't know, a year or two or so later, I think they perhaps may have sold it off. And maybe the arcade section survived, but I don't think the consumer section survived.
So, Gary, we just have a few minutes left. If someone wants to contact you, how do they do that?
Best contact is through my website, which is www.summerstechnologygroup.com. All my contact information is there. I'm in Mountain View. My telephone number is 650-947-0600. Or you can go to the website and all the contact info. My email address is there.
Excellent. We've been visiting here today with Gary Summers of Summers Technology Group. Gary, thank you for being on today's show.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
We'll be right back after these messages.